I had a conversation with my oldest son. I'm 80 to 90% of the time the dad I wanna be.
Yeah.
10 to 15% of the time, I am not. I'm not proud of it. I wanna get better at it. I want you to be better at it. So I'm hoping that you become the father that is 95% of the time. And maybe you're a little better than my dad and a little better than me, and that's what we want. Peace is not avoidance is another thing I know that you talk about, but I mean, it just avoiding the conflict doesn't always help. So you have the child that doesn't go home and see their family because they disagree with the way their parents see the world, or maybe the way they see what they're doing today, or whatever it may be. But having the ability to have healthy conversations and to guide people through that can be the ability can help people really develop world class families, and I think that's a really beautiful thing as well.
Absolutely. And, I have a almost 6-year-old. And this, it's so interesting as we evolve and as we grow, we just have these new lenses. And I'm like just starting, and you're helping me with this. Understand my responsibility in that I had an experience growing up, as we all do, and I have responsibility. And my wife and I talk about this all the time, in that we will argue in front of our son. A lot of family are like, oh, like let's go into the other room or whatever. We argue, and he'll say, stop fighting," and we'll just say, "Hey, it's okay for mom and dad to disagree. Mom cares about this, and that makes a lot of sense, and I'm caring about this, and that makes a lot of sense. We're just trying to figure it out." Like, for example, I love pushing my son. I think this is probably true for a lot of mom and dad relationships, right? Like, I'm like, he's going into kindergarten. He needs a rite of passage. He should go camping in the backyard by himself. My wife's like, that's crazy. Like, we don't want to do that. That's like too much. All she's doing is valuing safety and protection. And what I'm valuing is independence and agency and pushing things. Those are both really novel values. They're both really important. The right path forward is usually someplace in between.
Yeah, and you know what? The most beautiful thing about parenting is that it's imperfect. And so what you're showing your children when you have disagreements is that it's an imperfect relationship. You are two separate people who have come together and you've chosen to create something beautiful, which is that next generation. Your son is going to be fine if he camps out in the yard, and he's probably going to be fine if he doesn't. The reality is it's dad's job to push him out of his comfort zone, and it's mom's job to make sure he's comfortable. Well, comfort zones don't get you far in life. So it's our job as fathers to push them past those limits. And in doing so, we usually have to argue with our wives about that. And that's a very normal thing. I can tell you right now, there were many moments where we drove home from soccer games where I was asking questions or questioning their effort because I didn't care if we won or lost, if we were winning or losing, but I often cared if they looked like they were lethargic or they didn't care or they might have bad body language or I would start to talk about it. Now the difference between my wife and I is she would just avoid it completely and move on, and we would get home, and there were some times where I did the right thing and I questioned at the right time and I did the right amount of conversation, and there were other times where I went overboard. And
Mhm.
I went into my son's room and I put my arm around him and said, "Hey, I'm sorry that escalated way past what I wanted it to be. That was my own challenge I'm working through. I apologize. Let's work through this." And so there were times where, like you said, my wife was right and the way that we were dealing with it was fine. And there were other times where pushing them, what I know is when they have hard coaches today and one plays Division 1 soccer and the other is
Mm.
playing for an academy at in MLS and continues to progress, they both are okay when they have conflict and somebody tells them they're not doing a good enough job or they're not shutting down, which so many children today are. So it's very normal, and I actually love that part of the conversation because I think there's a healthy balance between how you deal with conflict, and I think you're broaching that subject and trying to not only help people in business, but in that familial environment.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And you're bringing up such a good point about we don't even have to get it right the first time, right? We just have to take responsibility for our experience, and it's okay to be passionate, it's okay to feel things really strongly, and it's okay to overdo it. I mean, obviously, we're not trying to overdo it, but I find the thing with conflict, maybe you're an exception here, but for most of the leaders and people that I work with, is when it we wanna get it just right. And that prevents us from getting anywhere because I need to figure this out, and they might see a different and we're looking for any excuse to not have the conflict, most of us. But just jump into the pool, get wet, make it happen, and then, like you said, we're gonna make mistakes. It's about the repair that's really, really important, and that is, when we can come back to the table and say something like you did with your son or in a business setting, "Hey, like, I realized you work so hard on this, and I was up there presenting the thing, and everyone was like, 'This is so great,' and I didn't even acknowledge you. And, like, man, I feel really terrible about that." Or we get in a fight and we just like at a leadership team meeting, and then just go back and just say, "Hey, I just wanted everyone to know that, you know, Jeremy and I had a one-on-one, and I wanted to let everybody know, but I was out of line, and I wanted to let everybody here know that was not okay." Man, like, that does so much value to the company in enriching and deepening those relationships and saying, "Hey, it's okay. We're all gonna make mistakes. We're all gonna screw this up at some point." It's not if, it's when, and what do we do when?
Yeah, you know what matters? Authenticity. So the reality is when you are authentic, even with your children, when you're authentic, they can rationalize it eventually. Now look, do I wish sometimes that the version of me at 48 was the version they got at 38 or 28? Yeah, I think this version's way more polished, and for me to go to where I was at 28 or 38, I usually have, like, 3 of those warnings. I'm like, "Hey, maybe we should do this, and maybe we should try that," and then someone will be like, "No, no, no," they just ignore it. I'm like, "Well, maybe we should have you guys thought about this?" And then the last time I'll be like, "Hey, guys, I'm not doing it this way. Here's how we're gonna be doing it now." And so now I have, like, these, I think they're developed versions of who I actually am, and, it's not always bad to be authentic is what I'm trying to get at. It's just important to be who you are and to work through it. Now, I always want a better version of myself. So, I had a conversation with my oldest son. He said something, to me, and I've talked about it briefly on this podcast before, but he said something like, "Dad, isn't that aren't you being hypocritical?" And I said,
Mm.
"I'm not being hypocritical. Have I made this mistake? 100%." But I brought up him playing soccer. I said, "When you play soccer, are you 100% of the time the best version of yourself on the field?" And he said, "No." I said, "Would you say 85 to 90%?" And he goes, "I would say 85 to 90%." I said, "Here's the thing. I'm 80 to 90% of the time the dad I wanna be.
Yeah.
10 to 15% of the time, I'm not proud of it. I want to get better at it. I want you to be better at it. So I'm hoping that you become the father that is 95% of the time. And maybe you're a little better than my dad and a little better than me. And that's what we want. But just remember, you're going to be imperfect too. And there's going to be parts of you that you want to help get better. And I'm going to be right here telling you that I wish I taught you a little bit better in those moments, but we're all in it together and you're getting the real version, dude. And that's the way it is. So it's
And
life.
you, son, are a huge help and support in my development. Like, how powerful is that to say to your son, like, "I'm gonna strive to be my best, but inevitably I'm not, and I need you to call me on that. I need you to let me know when it feels off." I mean, it's always the right thing to do to be authentic. But what your son does in this situation, when there may be conflict and he's saying this is hypocritical, he's expanding the aperture of your awareness and creating a larger world, which you want. You want to see that, and you said you're developing, and you're gonna continue to develop. So 55-year-old, 65-year-old, we'll continue it, and that's it. That's all we could ever ask for. It's not about getting there. It's like a yogi master, like,
Right.
probably still has room for improvement. We're always evolving, and that's the thing. As long as we're learning and growing and developing and doing the best we can, we're doing the right thing.
It's funny how you look back and your son's 6, you said, and there's things that I learned from having 2 that I did with the first one at 6 that I would never do again with the second one at 6, and or the perspective I have as an older brother. I have a younger brother who has 2 kids under the age of 3, and, and I'm always like, "Oh, it's not a big deal, Derek. It's no problem." Like, and yet as a father, I would have been like, "No, no, they have to do this." And it's just that perspective and that hindsight, which is so beautiful. But the point is that having a level of healthy conflict for them to experience allows them to experience something that they're gonna get into the world, and it's gonna make them better in their careers, it's gonna make them better in their lives, and as long as it's healthy, we're not obviously, you're not out there talking about creating conflict for the sake of conflict. You're talking about building relationships over transactions. It's not a transactional, "I want this, you want that." It's how do we build something deeper, and that comes from truly understanding each other.
Yeah, and as we truly work to understand ourselves. I mean, that's one of the most important things about conflict. It's not getting the other person to understand you. It's getting you to understand yourself and the situation with new eyes, which is hard because that's part of our identity. We see ourselves in a certain way with a certain belief system and certain stories about who we are. And oftentimes, the biggest conflicts are the ones that challenge our identity, challenge our beliefs. And when we care enough and we're curious enough, we can actually upgrade our mental operating system of who we are and what do we believe. And that's where the most significant, like life changing growth happens. And sometimes things need to get really bad for us to have that degree of breakthrough. I don't believe that that's necessary. I think if we can have awareness and some tools on how to do this effectively, we can increase the metabolism of our growth and evolution much more quickly.
So YouTube has this cool feature where they pick the next video for you, and it's right here on this screen. So I hope you enjoy this next video.